Hello and welcome to the D365 Insights podcast brought to you by Sourcing Connect. Today is a very special episode because it's the first episode that we're doing it face-to-face in a podcast studio. And I'm welcoming Anthony Bradburn, D365 Program Manager, Program Director, to talk to us about test in Dynamics programs. Not just Dynamics programs, any programs.
Any programs.
Yeah, so welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you on.
Really excited to be here, and it's live, so if we make a mistake, it'll add to the humour and colour. So
the authenticity.
Absolutely. Let's have a chat. I'm really looking forward to today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss something that is part of my everyday life and work. Anthony Bradburn, been in kind of ERP now for largely 30 years. Of that, 25 years has been as a freelance contractor. Done kind of a majority of roles, from business analyst to functional consultant to solution architect to project management and lately program management. Done some big blue chip names, I kind of guess. I've done some work for IBM, Costa Coffee, Innocent Drinks, London Quadrant Housing. Currently just finished up a program in July for ABF, Associated British Foods. Kind of put Dynamics in there on a big £20 million plus program. And just started a new gig a few weeks ago for UCC Coffee. So really happy to be here today. So thanks for having me, and let's have some fun and chat all things 365 and testing, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you for the intro. So you did give me a few little bits to work on for the questions. So you mentioned testing is testing. What do you mean by that? Is there a mindset shift needed to approach it well?
Yeah, I kind of guess, and I'll just pick this little kind of cue card up, really. Most programs, and I think you're going to make these available to anybody that wants these as free to issue material, typically go through a kind of end-to-end life cycle. So pretty much you start the program, you go through a bit of a definition phase where it's what are the business requirements. Then you go through into a bit of a delivery phase, which is all about building what the scope of what is there to meet requirements. And then you go into this kind of phase of acceptance, which largely is testing. And I say testing is testing because it's a hard slog, right? And when you say to somebody, test something at a high superficial level, it's quite simple. But when you get into the detail, it's quite complex. So people who embark on ERP implementation programs kind of struggle with the kind of change element. And change is a constant in our lives, whether we like it or we don't. As people, we tend to resist change because it's not familiar and it's not in our comfort zone. So you typically kind of work with the business to kind of assemble a team, which typically tends to be hybrid, right? So you've got resources from the solution integrator, you've got resources from the company, you sometimes bring in external contract resource, which is your area of expertise and specialty. And they're thrown into this kind of new realm of a program, which dances to slightly a different beat to kind of business as usual that I kind of term BAU. And I guess when you go into the first phase, it's all about listing requirements and you kind of do a bit of process mapping. Most businesses don't process map what they currently do today, let alone process map for what they want tomorrow. And ultimately, these programs are transformations because you're trying to give new, lean, efficient benefits and a platform upon which the business can really kind of springboard. So you put them in this define phase, and the skills in define defined phase tend to be like a little bit of business analysis, quite a lot of process mapping, quite a lot of eliciting requirements. The SI will do some kind of fit gap analysis, and then you'll kind of work out what you're going to accept as a fit and the gaps, whether you're going to accept the gaps or you're going to customize the solution around the gaps. And that's one skill set. And it typically is a phase that will last somewhere between as little as kind of 8 weeks and almost up to like 4 months in larger programs. And I think as people just get into a little bit of a cadence with the define phase, what typically happens is you then end the phase and you put them into this next phase, which is kind of delivery. And delivery is all about build. And the SI goes away, builds and constructs the system. And that typically runs from anywhere between 3 to 6 months, as a build phase can be larger and longer for larger programs. And once again, the people that are on the program get used to that cadence, that activity. And just as they're getting into their stride, you then change it. Now, people haven't tested ERP. What do I test? How do I test it? How do I write a test script? How do I prepare data for the test script? What happens if I came up with a business requirement? Let's say I signed that off in build, but when I come to test it, it's just not fit for purpose. What do? Oh, it's on me. I'm going to look really bad in front of a business because like I was there shining light and all of a sudden it's now not as I thought it would be. So testing is testing because it requires a lot of skills. It requires you to embrace disappointment. Testing is there, and the analogy I give is this. In build, you build a ship, and the ship is in dry dock. And whilst it's in dry dock, it's a real safe haven, right? It's not losing you any business continuity. It's not losing you any credibility. It's not losing you any profit. It's not causing you not to manufacture. But if you go live without testing, and then there's found to be quite a lot of holes and gaps, then it does disrupt. So when I talk about testing being testing and testing being a safe haven, it is for those things. And you'll find a lot of disappointment in testing because it's a lot stop-start. If it works, it's great. You can go on to the next step. If you don't, you need to fix the step that doesn't work before you can continue. And that stop-start kind of staccato kind of really is difficult for people that have never done it before to get used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so at what point would you engage testing then in a program?
This is a $64 million question. And like everything in life, I think there's no kind of absolute blueprint of success. But what I would always recommend, and this doesn't just apply to testing, it kind of applies to the whole kind of plethora of skills and resources that you need for an ERP program. You've got to get somebody in early and get somebody in early that understands where you want to be. So therefore, you need to know where you start in your journey, like the business as usual, and where you're trying to transfer to in terms of a target operating model. So if you can get somebody on as a test lead in before you start your defined phase, whilst it might seem like you've onboarded it too early, they understand the BAU, they understand the target operating model, they are kind of helping you shape through build. And because these phases typically don't have a great interceding time between phases, you really need to be building all of your test scripts for your acceptance phase within the build phase. So you need to have them on as a bare min requirement, in my opinion, before you start to build the system. And that will pay dividends because they're then not jumping into a skipping game that's really going too quick for them to kind of understand what they're doing, how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, with what resources. So I would say if you can afford it as a program, and that's kind of a double-edged sword because you don't really want to onboard resource too early, but if you don't, it will cost you. And therefore, it's kind of a false economy to think that you're saving money by onboarding them just when you need them. Actually, you probably need them sooner than you think.
Yeah, that's the feedback that I've had from a few clients, that to get them on board early doors, it actually saves you money in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it really sets your stalls out for success rather than being on the back foot of disappointment, because there's one commodity in life you can never, ever get back, and that's time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned safe haven then. How do we create that psychological safety for teams to surface issues without fear?
It's a difficult question to answer, but I think it's got a simple kind of answer in my mind, is that you have to look at the culture of the organisation, and whatever program and whatever resources you bring on board typically need to fit the culture of the organisation, because you can get square pegs, round holes, people that are too cocky, people that are too obnoxious, don't fit in, can't kind of have that engagement and embrace position that they need to have with the business. So what the company needs to do in a program of the size and nature that ERP programs is have a no blame culture, because blame isn't helpful, and you need to remove the psychological positioning that even though you might have work stream leads, functional leads, business process owners, they might be single people that are representing that functional stream, like order to cash or procure to pay, but it's a program and a business responsibility to take on the decisions. So the sign-off and the governance should allow that it's a program and business joint decision. And therefore, when people are going into testing to embrace this disappointment of things they find that won't work, it's okay, because what that's really saving you is having these problems when it really does matter, and it does create your real-world impacts, which is go live. So for me, testing is almost a safety net, but really ensures that in the previous two phases, both build and definition, that it's kind of fit for purpose. Does that kind of make sense?
That does make sense, yes. And I just want to note as well that Anthony hasn't seen these questions, so this really is off the cuff.
It is. I am flying by the seat of my pants.
I can see him sweating here. So can you walk us through the key test phases in a D365 program, from unit testing to dress rehearsal, and how each one builds confidence?
Okay.
That's quite a lot there.
Let's try and unpack it. So hopefully for the people that are kind of in the industry, and I'll try and put it in lay terms so people from business can understand. If we look at the delivery phase, this is what you're setting your stall out to build. And when you do D365 or any other ERP program, typically it won't just be the solution that is just the ERP solution like D365, SAP, PeopleSoft. It will be required to interface, integrate, and work with other internal systems and other external systems. And therefore, sometimes you need sort of mold them so you kind of get the best hand-to-glove fit with them. And for me, when you go into the delivery phase, and delivery phase tends to be run in an agile way, that you tend to build in sprints, and each sprint tends to last anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks. You build lots of little building blocks, because you can't tackle the monstrosity of the elephant that is D365 in one kind of big bite-sized chunk. So you tend to cut it down into individual areas, like order processing, procurement. Procurement breaks down into procurement for direct, or procurement for indirect. So as and when you build it, the SI will typically do what they call a playback, which is like, we've built this aspect and area of the system, and we've kind of configured it to do this based upon what your requirements were. And they tend to sort of showcase them. So unit testing really does come in a delivery phase itself. And it's just testing little bits and pieces in isolation, but it kind of is a kind of foundational platform that come the end of the delivery phase, you should be fairly certain 90+% all of the business requirements and aspects of what the solution to deliver have been delivered. What you haven't really done is put them together to kind of start to give you the start to end journey, the A to Z of what a business does and how it operates. So for me, you then go into this acceptance phase, and acceptance phase, it depends upon your business, it depends upon your budget, it depends upon the complexity of your interface integrations, what you want the solution to interact with. But it typically will go through, and definitely on my last 3 or 4 programs, a number of kind of key phases. So we do something that's called SIT, and people will kind of look at that acronym and say, well, what's SIT? And that tends to just mean system integration testing or site integration testing. And you'll typically have 2 phases of SIT. So you do SIT 1, which is where you put all of the bits together. You hook it up with kind of interfaces and integrations. My last program had, for a manufacturing food company, did quite a lot of integration with like third-party logistics companies, which kind of basically either bring raw material in or take finished goods out. And third-party logistics companies like DHL or FedEx or Bowkers tend to have their own solutions. So SIT is where you first start to join up the D365 solution with the external. And you tend to go into a SIT cycle of about 6 to 8 weeks. And in SIT 1, you tend to sort of have like no security or no kind of role-based privileges. So you're almost like running all of the tests as sysadmin. And then barring that all going okay, you then tend to do another SIT cycle, which is SIT 2. And that's where basically, if you work in procurement, you would only see purchasing aspects of a system, so be able to place an order. But because of segregation of duty, you can place an order, but you can't receipt an order. So you then overlay security, because security brings with it, like the computer says no. So you tend to go through a SIT cycle 1, 6 or 8 weeks, fix up the defects that you find in that 6 to 8 week period. You then go into a SIT 2 period, and that tends to sort of test your roles and security and how you're going to license the system and what users are going to see and what they've got access to versus what they don't. And then, assuming it has all gone to plan swimmingly, as all of these things clearly obviously do on all of my programs, then you go into what's called UAT, and some people call UAT user acceptance testing, and user acceptance testing is also known as end-to-end testing, where you tend to sort of hook up the whole kind of journey start to end. So you would take it like in a procure to pay, from creating a supplier to creating an order to receipt of the goods to payment of a supplier to production of the accounts out the back end. The big difference between kind of SIT and UAT really is SIT tends to be performed by people that have been involved with the program to date. So functional leads, workstream leads, and similar, and or tech people. And UAT tends to be people that have been less involved with the program, that are just users of a business. So UAT is a rite of passage to say people in a business that are going to be using the system on day 1 of go live are actually happy with what they're seeing as a process, what they're seeing as functionality and the outcomes. And they're saying like, yeah, I'm Bob, I work in procurement, I know what I do today, I like this, completely understand it. Yeah, tick in the box, it's good for me.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
That does make sense. So when you refer to dress rehearsal, is that UAT? Or is that something completely different? Is that like the whole thing?
Yeah, so what we haven't touched on and in all of this is that building the system is really, really good, right? And really, really important pivotal step in the whole kind of life cycle of putting these solutions in. I think for me, and important, we can build a really good ship, but when we've built a ship, we've got no kind of food, we've got no fuel, so we have to fill it up and we have to get the solution data ready. Mm-hmm. Now, lots of big businesses have lots of data today. Of course they do. They operate already. So they have customers, they have products, they have suppliers. And what you have to do is effectively migrate that data out of wherever it's stored in whatever repository today. You need to sort of look at it, cleanse it, enrich it, make it sure that it fits the new home that it's going to. Mm-hmm. And when you get to that kind of important juncture, and hopefully through the kind of build phase, you've already started your data migration activity, you then kind of put it all together a little bit as a bare minimum to support your sit and UAT cycles. But sometimes, for whatever reason, your data migration might be offset from those activities. So what you tend to do, aside from UAT, is we have to migrate all of this data for go live. But we don't really want to wait for the go live, because go lives typically happen on kind of a go live weekend. So it can be as short as 2 days. I've known go lives sometimes occur over kind of a 3 or 4 day window in terms of bank holidays and similar. But you don't really want to put all of that pressure and all of that kind of criticality of getting data in the system, because if you haven't got that within the system, of course, the system won't operate. You can't place an order without a customer, can't place an order without products. So a dress rehearsal is a means by which you can engage and dress rehearse your cutover in advance of a cutover. So a dress rehearsal typically sits between UAT and go live. Okay. So it gives an opportunity for people who perhaps haven't been in a program already to date, an opportunity to kind of go through that whole activity, know what it looks like, know what the typical errors will kind of throw out and kind of how to deal with them. And it's also a very good gauge to ratify and validate that whatever plan, time, window of outage you need for cutover is actually achievable or not.
Just so that I've understood this correctly, so you would test sort of smaller parts sort of individually first, then you've got sit 1, sit 2, UAT, dress rehearsal, go live.
Yes.
Amazing, I've got it. One question that came to me when I was listening to that was, when you've got the SI, and the SI obviously doing the build, I know that you have a test team sort of at the business, but does the SI then have testers as well? So are they doing sort of their elements of testing and then you're testing it afterwards? Or how does that work between the two of you?
So this is a really good question, right? And it's one that unfortunately lots of businesses don't always quite make in a kind of time experienced kind of way and manner in which it needs to. So let's just say you're a medium-sized to large manufacturing company, can turn anywhere over between 250 to 1.5 billion pound turnover per annum. And we're really good at making products. We're really good at selling products. We're really good at kind of having a captive consumer. But we're embarking on doing this kind of digital transformation, rollout of a new ERP, probably out of some kind of our old platform doesn't work, our old systems don't work, our old systems are distributed. We want kind of one version of the truth. So they embark on these programs, and typically when they're looking at resources, they'll typically sometimes go for what they know is, or what they don't know. So they'll go for trusted confidence, and they'll typically go one of two routes. They'll either bias the whole kind of program around the SI, and whilst that might seem sensible, it's a little bit, the SI has done the fit gap, the SI has done the build. You are then having the SI in testing, marking their own homework. So let's just say the SI typically knows a product, let's just say it's D365 F&O or CE really, really well. What they don't know, and they will never really completely get their arms around, and the emphasis is on completely, is the business and what they do and how they need to do it and what's important to them. So if you get the SI, as I say, in testing to mark their own homework, there's no segregation of duty. So then if you go live and it all goes horribly wrong, who are you going to blame? The SI will stand behind a very litigious statement of works, terms and conditions. Really, the company that is embarking on this program need to own testing, because a key part of testing is user acceptance testing. Now, to come back to the point that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, which is people within the business, they know the business. They don't yet completely, even though they might have been through 3 or 5 months of build, completely all of the nuances and functionality that D365 has to offer. Nor will they probably be experienced or cultured in how to write a test script or how to execute a test script. So let me give you an example. There will be, when you set up, say, a customer record in an ERP platform, a kind of typical customer, and then there might be a subtle nuance where you have a different type of customer. So in a kind of a company that interact with maybe, the sort of brands and supermarkets that you might know in the high street, like Waitrose, Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's, they typically do a lot of their interaction of order placement and replenishment via EDI. But there'll be other smaller customers and distributors that don't really transact via EDI, which is electronic data interchange. So there's typically 2 ways to set up a customer, an EDI customer and a non-EDI customer. But to most people within the business, it's just a customer record. But if you don't test both of those, which all require different attributes, different settings, then you're going to really come unstuck when you come to deploy this. And testing is an art. You almost have to be perverse, because testing by its very nature is to embrace disappointment. You are trying to break it, and it requires a very unique person and mindset to come to the table and think, how do I break it? What's a negative test? You try and do something that you shouldn't do, and that doesn't come natural. So I think to come back, really, you need to seek experienced resources in the test QA space. And you can either do that via an agency like yourself, understanding what skills you need, and hopefully somebody like yourself with experienced knowledge in the field can guide them the right direction. Or they could go to like an external test partner whose business is nothing other than testing. I know on a recent program that I did for ABF, we used Explio. Explio, an outfit that specialise in testing of solutions, whether it be ERP, HR, CRM.
Okay, fantastic. And so within a tester, then you say that you need to be a certain type of person. So tell me a bit more about that. So is it a type of personality? Is there, what sort of skill sets do you really like to recruit on your programs within test?
Yeah, so there's typically kind of 2 or 3 main kind of aspects. So you typically need a test lead, and that's a unique skill set to lead out the whole team. And if it works in that hybrid model where it uses contract resource plus resource from a company itself, the test lead will be experienced enough with the test engineers to guide and support the people within the business how to write and create test scripts, positive and negative. So I think for me, test lead is pivotal. You also need a degree in testing project management. So what are we going to test when? And that can either be an experienced test lead that's got project management as a skill set that sits aside, or you can just have a generic project manager that assists and works with a test lead to construct what resources they need, when and for how long. Because what you'll find out in testing, and I think I alluded to it earlier, it's a bit stop-start. So you can have really a lot of unforeseen issues in testing, depending upon how well you executed your previous 2 phases. So if your requirements were too high, you'll get a kind of false positive in your fit gap. You'll build it based upon that, but when you come to kind of use it in anger, it's not fit for purpose, and that'll come out in a defect. So you tend to need someone with a kind of defect management cap on that can kind of control the kind of defects and work with the SI or other parties to get those resolved. And then you have the test engineers, which are the kind of real grunt heavy lifters that kind of execute, or you can use people within the business. Also, what we've talked to so far is kind of like just manual version of testing. And clearly Microsoft have brought out the 1 version update. So you're kind of mandated to have at least 2 software upgrades in a year. And as part of that major upgrade, what you need to sort of take in stride is regression testing. So if you think you've got this system, which is a lot of building blocks that you all put together to create this beautiful house, you'll test them. But if one part kind of succeeds and another part fails, you'll go through the defect management cycle to resolve. But then sometimes what you fixed could have broke something you've already tested. So regression testing has a bearing on kind of the activity and the task. And that becomes really difficult, time heavy, resource heavy. So where I've kind of are guiding programs now in the last 2 years is test automation. Test automation is great because it's almost like you can kind of macro record a series of steps, and test automation kind of reduces the kind of amount of resources that you typically have to. And the benefit that you also get with test automation is it's reliable. So humans are human, we're fallible, we screw up, we fup. And I think test automation, because it's just a code that's executed, it kind of just gives you reliable, predictable results in a record evidence-based way. But as and when it found, instead of you scratching your head and say, did I press that button? Did I really do that? I can't remember what I did to get back to the error. And part of the whole kind of root causing of an error is being able to recreate it. Test automation software typically gives you that without question as a kind of part of its function.
Great. So is that quite costly, having test automation tools, or, against resources? How does that kind of...
So test automation, and latterly I've used a product called LeapWork. It's kind of a what they call a no-code software platform to test. It's ERP agnostic, so it just doesn't work with D365. It works with many other out-of-the-box solutions as well. And basically any kind of WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get kind of software. That test automation tool will work. Requires an upfront investment. right? So typically it depends upon your needs, but it can be as cheap as kind of 75 to 100K upwards. But the ROI on test automation tool is a no-brainer. So we did a cost benefit analysis on my last program. And because you will typically have 2 upgrades a year, and let's just say even a small ERP implementation will probably take you anywhere between 2 to 3 solid weeks with a number of people from the business to test. Because businesses typically, unless they're large, won't have a test department within their IS function. So then you're taking people out of business as usual roles within finance, within procurement, within manufacturing. And if you do that twice a year, that's 6 weeks of FTE resource. And if you think most functional areas cover at least 8 areas, that's like already into the hundreds of FTE days. Yeah. So the benefit that test automation gives you is it just rinse repeats, right? And it runs. So humans run on an 8-hour day. Test automation software can run on a 24-hour window. Yeah. 365. So it kind of pays for itself.
Yeah.
So if you see the long-term game, then everybody should be doing test automation.
Yeah. Okay, so UAT is often seen as a big moment, but what makes it truly effective? How do we ensure it reflects real business scenarios like DILO and WILO, which I believe stands for day in the life of and week in the life of?
I'm absolutely taken aback. You're obviously an exceptionally bright lady, or I'm an exceptionally good communicator, and I don't think it's the latter, so I think it's probably the former. But yeah, great question, right? So let me try and sort of break that up into some bite-sized chunks. So the key to UAT being successful is, it's going to sound boring, but it's preparation, right? And it's about testing the right end-to-end scenarios that literally represent 80% in kind of a Pareto analysis of what your business does as core things. So let me try and kind of unpack that a little bit and make sense of the comment that I've just said. So you can't test absolutely everything and every kind of variant thereof, because there'll just never be enough time, there'll not be enough budget, there'll not be enough resource. So what you need to do is kind of understand your end-to-end business process. Like we've perhaps touched on before, businesses don't really completely understand their end-to-end. They understand typically, yeah, we manufacture and sell products to supermarkets. Great. But they don't know all of what they do in every different solution, not just D365, but what they might do in demand planning, what they might do with kind of advanced planning solutions and similar. So the key thing is to get the core business processes. Now, every business, and they're not unique in this, will say they're complex. But basically, if you really sort of look at businesses, they're simple. People make it complex. Processes make it complex, because sometimes business will always entertain customers' asks and don't always lean out processes. So first thing is to understand, as I say, what is core to your business process. And like the last manufacturing company that I did, we came up with about 10 to 12 core end-to-end scenarios that typically would represent 80 to 90% of what covers their business. So that's important. And then it's to say, you know, around those 10 or 12 processes, who do I need, at what time, in what order, with what data to be able to feed this through. So a big part of UAT being successful is in the preparation. Another big part of UAT is entering it when you are ready. So most businesses fall over themselves because they just see the rush to the finish line, right? You've been probably on somewhere between a 12 to 2 to 3 year program. You've kind of done the two previous phases of defining it. You've done the bit that's kind of building it. You've done a little bit of sit. So you just want to do U18. You just want to like break through the finish line, like, and you're all happy. But UAT is an extremely important thing because it's the start of the pass of the baton to the business for them to accept that what you have built, how you have built it, how you've designed this process actually fundamentally works for them. And sometimes some of these programs, and I've seen some horror shows, right? The ones that go badly are the programs that don't integrate themselves with the business, because if you think that these programs run anywhere between 12 months and, say, 36 months, the world's a volatile place, right? It changes. Customer needs changes. What we manufacture changes. How we procure changes. So if you don't integrate yourself with the business to constantly evolve your program around the changing landscape in which you're trying to deliver this ship out of dry dock into water, when you launch it and do that big ta-da reveal, people are going to say, I don't like that. And no matter how well the system works, if people do not adopt it, it will be a failure because people make it work. So for me, ensure you're fit and proper to go into UAT. So all of the kind of prereqs are met, that we've got a system, we've got the data, our external parties are lined up, our environment's lined up. We know what test scenarios end to end we're going to do in what order. And that's a recipe for success in UAT in my mind.
Fantastic. So what is the can we just go back to the day in the life of and the week in the life of? So what does that actually mean?
So day in the life of, week in the life of, month in the life of, year in the life of, Dilo, Milo, or Wilo, Milo and Yilo. Bit of a mouthful.
Not YOLO.
Is kind of businesses do certain things on a day-to-day basis. But sometimes what it does on a different cadence of a weekly or monthly is subtly different. So a typical one for a business is month end. And month end brings about different activities, different challenges, different kind of functions from the system. So like typical one in finance is you'll do the finance month end, which you only do at a month end. So that needs to be represented in the Milo, not in a day in the life of. And same in year of a life of, where you close your accounts down, have your audits in, then post an adjustment journal for balance sheet restatement. So these kind of different cadences are really important, but you need somebody with experience to tell you that that's what you need to test. Because if you just test your day to day, you're not testing your Wilo and you're not testing your kind of Milo and Yilo. If you then go live and you come to do your month end and you start doing different things that you've not tested, you then bring in a lack of business continuity, an absolute increased exceptional unrealised risk, and that can just be harmful to you, your employees, your profit and loss, your customers and your credibility. So why not sort of, test it when you should in UAT.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for clarifying that, and sorry for my immaturity.
No, I thought you were spot on.
Laughing.
I'm employing you, Sarah, on my next project for sure. Absolutely. I don't even know why I'm here. You just know everything. So.
Okay, so what should one consider when defining the scope of testing? Does it need to cover everything, or is prioritization key?
Prioritization is key. Nobody's got an open checkbook. No one's got an infinite amount of resource. So you need to be careful about what you test, how you test, to what rigor. And as much as you plan and prioritize around what's really key and critical to your business, you'll be kind of giving yourself kind of a pat on the back and having a lot of credibility and a lot of removal of risk. And that should be the sole outcome of kind of testing, to know that kind of when you kind of come to use this in anger, it's going to do exactly what you expect it to do and be kind of a rinse and repeat of UAT. You shouldn't be like encountering new unrealised risks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So how do you manage expectations around what testing can and can't guarantee, especially when stakeholders want certainty?
Nothing in life is completely certain, and anybody that tells you different is being a little bit disingenuous. There will always be challenges in a go live, because real world is real world, and as much as you can try and replicate it in this safe haven that is kind of UAT, you never completely do cover it all off. And like when I said, you can test the ship in dry dock and it's great. You didn't test it running into an iceberg because you didn't know when you were off the south coast of England you'd be encountering an iceberg, but it just happens to be one there on go live, right? So you kind of just have to mitigate, minimise the risk, and that's what UAT does. The outputs of testing should be proof to the business empirically, objectively, rather than subjective, that the go live has got, you know, viability and it's got reassurance and it builds credibility. On the last program we did, we executed via an automated piece of software leap work and manually somewhere in the region of about 7,500 tests.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of testing. But yeah, I think it's a difficult one. I think stakeholders will always look for a cast iron guarantee. You can simply do best endeavours, but best endeavours should give you a 90+% confidence in your go live. The things that kind of UAT doesn't completely do is to say your kind of data migration model is valid in all kind of eventualities. It'll only test the data that you actually use in performance of the testing, not all of it, but that's what you have to go with, right? You just have to sort of just cover off the main basis, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So how do you tackle challenges like poor test case quality, misaligned expectations, or the dreaded blame culture? Have we already covered that, the blame culture?
I think the blame culture one is something that, in terms of the breadth and depth of a testing, kind of by its very nature kind of removes a single point person failure that you will have, because sit 1, sit 2 UAT, you are layering up the kind of test depth, and you're also giving a lot of confidence in doing that. And the repetition by itself will drive better qualitative outcomes. I think the stakeholders will see the kind of, as I say, the kind of outcomes from the tests. And if you record that in, you know, like D365 is a bedrock upon ADO, Azure DevOps, the test case, the test suite, the test stats should give them comfort and a belt and braces approach. But I do think it comes back to the devil's in the detail. So if your test cases are too superficially high or not testing in the right areas, whilst the outcomes will show positivity, it will be a kind of false positive, and that will come out in kind of go live. So it comes back to having the right detail, and having the right detail is risk mitigated by having the right resource that knows what they're doing. So people is a common thread, but experienced people will deliver experienced kind of predictive outcomes. If you have a level of inexperience, you pitch your test cases incorrectly, you only do happy clappy path testing, don't kind of cover any of the unhappy paths that all too frequently happen in everyday business life, and you're going to come unstuck at go live.
So what does good look like, not just in test execution, but how teams feel about the process?
I think for me, teams are what make it work. So ERP programs are kind of big beasts. They cover every aspect of a business. They're drawn out over an extended period of time. The team, if you've got a good team with depth and breadth, then that makes light work of much work. And therefore, it's about resourcing your program. And the biggest disappointment in any program is kind of just missetting the expectation. And I think for me, that's where you've got to drive the expectation of business that, like, when you implement the program, it's not the end. It's just the start of a journey. I think somebody recently told me that when you go for a driving test and you sit in a car and the instructor at the end of your sort of driving test says you've passed, you think, great, I'm like Nigel Mansell or, sort of Max Verstappen. No, that's just the start of your journey, right? And the same is true about an ERP D365 implementation. The end of a program is the start of your build out of your digital platform that then is a springboard upon which to do continuous improvement and development. But it's people that make it work, and it comes back to that adoption. Adoption is so key. If you don't ready the business for change to embrace and energize around the solution that you are trying to put in, you'll get marginal return on investment. And people will always see it as a negative thing, not a positive thing, which is counterproductive to the kind of atmos and culture that you're trying to bring.
And that's why it's important to have that business change readiness throughout
Absolutely.
The program. Yeah.
Continuously from the get-go. And that's not just change within the business, it's change within the team that you're trying to create, because like I said, between all of the phases, delivery, define, deliver, accept, dress rehearsal, cut over, deploy, hypercare, that in itself is change. So change is a constant theme. And you don't really want to build a solution that is a replica of what you already have. Because if you're doing that, what's the point? They're expensive programs, they're far-reaching programs, and you want to get some benefit. So it stands by its very nature that you're trying to do something a little bit different, a little bit more efficient, that's kind of, just transformative. And that's why the kind of transformation and change is so important to it. Like Blackpool rocket should run all the way through.
Yeah. And would you suggest then, you're saying obviously that's the start of the journey, would you suggest for businesses once the system is implemented that they have an internal team? I've certainly had roles for finance systems managers, for example, that would then sit in with the system and the team and help manage it and help utilize it to the best of its ability. Would you suggest to businesses that they would have internal resources once you've gone live?
Yeah, so completely agree. And it's a great spot that you've found there. Too many times a business will see a program running for a finite period of time, be it 2 years or 3 years. And it puts a lot of investment and a lot of time and a lot of resources into sort of a capability to deliver these kind of programs. And really what it's trying to sort of set its stall out is around a target operating model, how it wants to sort of dynamically change itself for the better. But typically what goes completely amiss is they might have had disparate systems, they might have had a lot of on-premise systems, a lot of what I call legacy IT resources, where there might be infrastructure reporting and similar, all focused around on-site solutions. And in 2025, a lot of it is all in the cloud, right? So the skill sets that you need for that are sort of completely different from the traditional IT skills of yesterday. And this investment that you've just made, it might have cost you somewhere between 10 and 30 million to implement. It's kind of a shiny new toy, right? But if you don't continually look after it, keep it maintained, keep it oiled, keep evolving with the Microsoft One version updates, it will really constrain the returns on investment you've made. So an experienced program manager from the get-go will be advising a client, what is your target operating model to sustain the investment and the continuous improvement that I've just talked to, in terms of when this program ends, the journey just starts. What does that journey look like from a resource perspective? So you should be considering, like, cliched words like center of excellence. You should have business process owners that are focused upon leveraging the best it can of a solution for that aspect of a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll be pleased to know this is the last question I'm going to fire at you. You're almost through. So if you could give one piece of advice to a program lead about testing in D365, what would it be?
Just repeat that question again.
If you could give one piece of advice to a program lead about testing in D365, what would it be?
Prepare, plan, and course correct. So all of this comes down to good preparation. All of this comes down to good planning. But invariably, no matter how well you prepare and how well you plan, there will be bumps in the road. There will be obstacles that you were unforeseen, and you need to course correct. Because for me, too many program managers, and they're my peers and colleagues, and I'm not a very good one, if I'm being honest, but there's better people out there, is it's too easy to kick the can down the road. So if I get a problem, it's a delay. If I get a problem, it's more money, it's more resources. And actually, sometimes you just need to sort of pause, look at the problem, and look at an alternative way in which you can maintain your original plan, but slightly do something different. And a real good example of that was on my recent program, where we should have built all of the build scripts for SIT inbuilt, but we hadn't. So I could have kicked SIT down the road by at least 4 weeks on the burn rate of a program that was costing probably anywhere between 600 to 800k per month. So we kind of parallel ran them in that we prioritized their script completion based upon the ones that we needed to execute first. And whilst we were executing those, we were still backfilling and writing the other scripts for the follow-on work. And then we started to hit other buffers within the program about SIT 1 and SIT 2. So we started to put those into a bit of a smelting pot. So instead of having a 6 weeks, a 2-week break and a 6 weeks in between the SIT cycles, we overlaid them. But the base rule was you couldn't execute the script for SIT 2 unless you'd done it for SIT 1. So it became a kind of cyclical iterative that kind of overlaid the two kind of phases. It worked well. It ensured we still exited SIT when we should have to then enter UAT. So, yeah, those are the things that I'd recommend anyone to do. Doesn't work for everybody, kind of worked for me. And that's the biggest vote of success, right? Delivered the program on time, on budget, and to quality, and it was good adoption.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. It's been really good. And I say this at the end of most of my podcasts, but I genuinely mean it, because I do learn so much from every single one. And that helps me when I'm recruiting people. So I know more about Test than I ever have. So that's amazing. Thank you. To all of our listeners and watchers, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can get us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also follow Source and Connect on LinkedIn. If you want to add Anthony Bradburn, D365 program manager and testing guru, then you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And really enjoyed today. It was a bit nerve-wracking in parts and pieces, but look, I do this for kind of a living. Happy to share my experiences, and thanks for having me on, Sarah. I think, as you say, you're an absolute gem to work with. You understand the market, you understand the skill sets.
I do my best.
I think it's about building teams, isn't it? And building cohesive teams that fit the culture of a business in which require resources to support their end goals. And if anybody wants to look at the material that I think you're going to offer online, that's a good starting place. And look, people can hook up on LinkedIn, ask further questions. We've got our kind of monikers, and been great fun. And thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Thank you.